Rick and Morty's 9th season just recently premiered with an absolute game changer. Season 9, Episode 1, There's Something About Morty, changes the series in a way that I genuinely did not see coming. Almost immediately, the writers bring back Evil Morty, who was last seen in Season 7 helping Rick defeat Rick Prime. I already covered Evil Morty's entire story in another video, so go check that out if you need a refresher. But to briefly recap, Evil Morty spent the first 5 seasons of the series hiding in the shadows and working behind the scenes. Evil Morty began his master plan by framing Rick C-137 for the murders of several other Ricks across the multiverse. The next time we saw Evil Morty was in Season 3, where he ended up becoming the president of the Citadel. And finally, in Season 5, Evil Morty escaped the central finite curve. Evil Morty is easily the breakout character of the series, and the writers are clearly aware of that. No longer is he hiding in the shadows. Evil Morty is front and center here with easily his biggest role and most screen time to date. With Rick Prime out of the picture, Evil Morty finally gets a chance to shine as the main villain of the series. This episode reveals that Rick and Evil Morty have secretly been going on missions together to protect the central finite curve since their last encounter. After acquiring the Omega device from Rick Prime, Evil Morty began using it to blackmail Rick. Obviously, Morty is really upset to find out about all of this because, once again, Rick has kept him out of the loop. But what really surprised me about this episode is the direction that they took Evil Morty's character. Up until now, Evil Morty clearly despised Rick Sanchez and everything that he ever represented. But in this episode, he almost seems to enjoy Rick's company more than he ever thought he would. He constantly taunts Morty about his relationship with Rick, almost like he's trying to replace him. It's a really fun dynamic that doesn't overstay its welcome, and the chemistry between Rick and Evil Morty is undeniably entertaining. This time around, the duo face off against a multiversal entity known as the Collective. The Collective honestly feels like one of the biggest threats the series has ever introduced, right up there with Rick Prime and Evil Morty himself. I love its design and its abilities, which honestly remind me a lot of Unity's powers, but on a multiversal scale. We watch as it consumes entire dimensions across the multiverse, with seemingly no end to its power. Morty tags along despite Rick's annoyance, and what follows is hands down the best action sequence in the entire series. Rick and Morty's animation just gets better and better with each season, with this episode truly blowing me away by just how good it looked. The animation is beyond fluid, and the action is oozing with creativity. Rick and Evil Morty are both operating at full power, constantly pulling out new gadgets, abilities, and absurd pieces of sci-fi technology that we've never seen before. Up until this point, I was convinced that this was going to be the best episode of the entire series. And while it remains a great episode, I'm not really sure how to feel about the second half. I think the episode pushes Evil Morty in a direction that feels disconnected from everything that made him a great character. The more I thought about it, this felt less like the Evil Morty we'd been following for years and a completely new rendition of the character. Evil Morty's entire story has always revolved around being free from Rick, and he finally got that just to immediately lose it afterwards. Everything he did, from manipulating the Citadel and escaping the central finite curve, it was always about escaping Rick. And that's why I kind of struggle with this episode a little bit. Evil Morty's not just working with Rick for his benefit in this episode. He's working with Rick because he enjoys it. During their battle with the Collective, you could see Evil Morty is smiling ear to ear. This is the most fun he's ever had in his life. As much as Evil Morty hates to admit it, he's really no different than any other Morty. He gets jealous of Morty's relationship with Rick. He's constantly seeking Rick's attention, and by the end of the episode, the emotional core revolves around Evil Morty feeling betrayed. And look, it's not that characters can't change, because the entire series has been about Rick Sanchez growing as a person. I think we just needed an extra episode with Evil Morty to make this sudden shift in his character make more sense. The rest of the episode revolves around Rick betraying Evil Morty because, of course, Rick betrays everyone. It turns out Rick has an entire dimension inside of a giant bunker for emergencies. And pissing Evil Morty off is probably one of the most dangerous things that you could do in this series. Evil Morty easily tracks the family down, which leads to another awesome action scene. And this battle is personal for Evil Morty because for once in his life, he finally gave Rick a chance. Rick is definitely in debt to Evil Morty as well because Evil Morty was the entire reason they defeated Rick Prime. While I would have liked another episode to explore their dynamic before they have a falling out, I think what we got was pretty good. The fight is still a lot of fun with plenty of great animation and hilarious gags like this little bit that Rick pulls out. My only problem with the climax is just how much aura Evil Morty loses here. He puts up a hell of a fight against Rick, but afterwards he gets jumped by the entire Smith family, and this feels like a joke. I never thought we would see Evil Morty regress to such a pathetic character, but here we are. For a character who's been built up over a decade as an unstoppable force, this scene strips away a lot of what made Evil Morty great. It's also kind of pissed me off because my last videos aged terribly now. In a final desperate move, Evil Morty freezes time in a callback to A Wrinkle in Time from Season 1. But if you remember how that went down for Rick, well, I mean, you can probably fill in the rest. The time police show up to arrest Evil Morty, but I have no doubt he'll come back eventually in a big way. This opens the gateway for plenty of new ideas and exciting opportunities to do things in the future. With both Rick Prime and Evil Morty out of the picture, the series has seemingly moved on from its two biggest threats. But if anything, this episode finally gives Evil Morty a reason to come after Rick. Evil Morty's imprisonment has the potential to be one of the greatest storylines in the entire series. We just watched Evil Morty hit rock bottom, so there's nowhere to go but up from here. My entire feelings on this episode could completely change depending on how good the future of this storyline ends up being. Many of you agreed that this was a necessary plot development for the character in the recent poll I put out asking if this episode ruined Evil Morty. For once, Evil Morty is no longer the most powerful or smartest person in the room. There's a lot of potential here for Evil Morty to slowly build his power back up through the prison system and turn it into his own empire. It would be a great way to mirror Evil Morty's storyline back in Season 3. Navigating your way through a broken system and defying all odds to come out on top is exactly what Evil Morty likes to do. The one thing that remained clear coming out of this episode is the Evil Morty storyline is far from over, and I can't wait to see where they continue from here. But let me know down in the comments below what you thought about Season 9's premiere and Evil Morty's character arc. Thank you all for continuing to support my channel and being patient with me. Life gets a little hectic, but it seems like things are back on track, so normal uploads should resume soon. The next video on my radar will be the top 10 worst episodes of Rick and Morty, so stay tuned and thank you all for watching.